Greetings and welcome to our very first Instrument Flight Procedures Optimization Industry Day. Man, we are so excited that you are joining us today. For those of you that do not know me, I am Angela McCullough, the Vice President of Mission Support Services. My organization is responsible for designing, developing, publishing, and maintaining aeronautical data, the very backbone of the National Airspace System. We're glad that you accepted the invitation to join us for this very important event so that you're not only informed, but involved in the decisions that will help shape the future of the NAS. Today, we're going to discuss how the FAA is modernizing the airspace and a new process called Instrument Flight Procedures Optimization, where the FAA will routinely review our IFP inventory to reduce the number of redundant and underutilized flight procedures. This is just one initiative we are taking on in the ATO to meet our commitment to modernize the National Airspace System. Removing equipment and procedures that are no longer adding value is sort of like a tech refresh for the NAS. But before we get into all that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Air Traffic Organization's Chief Operating Officer, Ms. Terry Bristol, also known as my boss. Ms. Bristol is responsible for ensuring safe, efficient, and secure air traffic services for approximately 50,000 aircraft operating near 30 million square miles every day. She provides leadership and direction for 32,000 employees that deliver the organization's core functions of air traffic services, technical operations, system operations, flight program operations, and safety management. Additionally, she provides the guidance and governance to Mission Support Services, my organization, technical training, management services, and program management, all organizations that provide support and services to keep those operational groups running. Ms. Bristol has executed the deployment and integration of NextGen, an ambitious multi-year infrastructure and technology modernization initiative, as well as other airspace improvements. Her leadership has been critical to shepherd unmanned aircraft systems and commercial space operations into daily NAS operations. She has enhanced the organization's focus on risk management and innovative training initiatives, and has made great strides on behalf of the agency in strengthening labor relations and amplified partnerships with the aviation industry. Terry, welcome, and thank you for joining us today to provide opening remarks to kick off this exciting program.
Well, Angela, that was a mouthful. Thank you. And welcome, everyone. We are all so excited that so many of you could tune in today. So the initiatives we're going to talk about today are part of an overall strategy, as Angela said, of ensuring that our air navigation infrastructure is not only safe and accessible today, but also adapting to meet the needs of tomorrow. Over the years, the FAA has worked side by side with you and other industry members to execute our NAS navigation strategy for performance-based navigation. In a PBN-centric environment, flights follow shorter and more direct paths that enable pilots to navigate with greater precision and accuracy. This in turn increases capacity and efficiency and ultimately improves safety, reduces environmental impacts, and it increases user access into the National Airspace System. The FAA's work to be responsive to stakeholder requests for more efficient routes. We hear you. We've moved to a national implementation approach, and our prioritization process has allowed us to focus on the most important requests for new procedures first, those that are safety related, had a mandatory publication date, or were part of a national initiative like PBN. Over time, we've had good results. Back in 2000, we had 5,000 procedures. 20 years later, we have more than quadrupled our inventory. Of our 21,000 current procedures, more than 9,000 are PBN routes, which are more efficient and easier on the environment. Now, we feel good about the options that we've added, but it's time to evaluate our inventory of instrument flight procedures to see if they still provide a service. We do this because procedures are not only costly to develop, but they're costly to maintain. They have to be checked every 2 or 4 years, and they must be flight validated about every 18 months, all of which costs flight time, fuel, and workforce hours. This inefficiency also causes more notice to airmen NOTAMs with increased communication, complexity between pilot and controllers that could potentially lead to miscommunications and safety risks. Current estimates indicate that about 20% of our inventory of IFPs is either redundant or underutilized. I'll give you a couple of examples. At DeKalb Peachtree Airport in Atlanta, out of 19,400 operations in 2019, we have one area navigation procedure that was used fewer than 20 times and one that was used only once. At nearby Covington Municipal Airport, we have a non-directional beacon approach that was never used at all during the 270 operations in 2019. These procedures aren't automatically candidates for removal. We know they might still serve a purpose for simulator training and controller certification, as an example. But we can't be sure until we get your input on how certain procedures impact your access to system safety. So today, we're announcing that we've established a framework, an IFP optimization, to analyze the inventory and recommend redundant or underutilized procedures for removal or amendment. We know that there have been previous attempts to winnow down our inventory of procedures. In fact, we were able to cancel over 1,900 procedures through the National Procedure Assessment. But what makes this effort different? It's our commitment to stakeholder engagement and data-driven decisions as we do a deep dive into each airport. There's a saying in aviation many of you have probably heard. If you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. So we'll increase engagement and collaboration in order to evaluate each circumstance individually. And we'll develop a repeatable process for recurring IFP reviews. Once we've optimized our IFPs, it will be easier to implement new procedures, optimize training requirements and chart clutter, and reduce the number of NOTAMs that we publish. By reducing implementation and maintenance costs, we'll be able to pivot to other burgeoning priorities, such as new entrants and evolving travel needs. This initiative is only one element of the FAA's commitment to streamline the National Airspace System to make flying even safer, more efficient, and more predictable. There are others: the reduction of unneeded ground infrastructure, including some of our very high frequency omnidirectional range minimum operational network, or VOR MONs, NAVAIDS as an example. Now that pilots rely on GPS, we need fewer of these ground-based VORs. But regardless of how we get there, optimizing procedures and managing our resources strategically benefits everyone, because we all rely on a safe and efficient national airspace system. I want to thank everyone who's working with us to make sure that our efforts are successful. All of these pieces coming together thanks to your commitment to the future. So enjoy the rest of the IFP Optimization Stakeholder Day. It is something for everyone. And again, thank you for being here. Angela, back to you.
Terry, thank you so much for joining us and kicking this off. I'm excited. I think it's going to be a fantastic day.
Yeah, agree. Thank you.
Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about what it feels like being the leader of such an exciting organization where so many projects and programs come together, Mission Support Services. We are just that, a support organization to the agency's mission. The folks that make up Mission Support Services, or as we like to call it, AJV, are dedicated to creating and maintaining a safe and efficient airspace system. Our teams in AJV are utilizing data-driven methods and cost-benefit analysis to create this project to reform our IFP inventory. This will improve the efficiency of maintaining and developing IF instrument flight procedures. It will reduce costs to maintain the airspace, increase safety by reducing the number of NOTAMs issued, and allow for resources to be reallocated back to the creation of new IFPs and to add value to system users. As we maintain a national focus for alignment of programming, we will be coordinating at the regional and airport level through our service centers to ensure successful execution of the IFP optimization process. This communication and collaboration with you allows for increased safety and access and ensures you have the right procedure at the right time. We look forward to hearing from you today and working with you as we move forward. Now, I'd like to introduce my peer, David Bolter, the Vice President of ATO's Flight Program Operations, or as I like to say, he runs the FAA's airline. Dave is responsible for all aspects of FAA flight program safety, administration, operations, training, and maintenance. His core business is safe flight operations and efficient execution of 4 primary areas, including aviation safety training, flight inspection research, development, test and evaluation support, and transportation. The FAA flight program operates 39 aircraft in worldwide flight operations and holds an airport operator certificate under Part 135, as well as Part 145 repair station certificate. Dave, welcome, and thank you for joining us. You are a critical partner in the successful execution of this optimization effort.
Thank you, Angela. It's great to be here, and thanks for the invite. I've lived through the 5,000 to 21,000 procedures. Every one of those procedures has been commissioned by my organization. And who are we? So, as Angela said, we're the agency's airline. So we consolidated all the agency's air assets under one organization, or the Air Traffic Organization, a few years ago. And of those 39 airplanes, we run King Air 390 series, Challenger 600 series, Lear 60s, 2 Citation XLs, and a Global 5000. It's a mixed fleet, but that's what happens when you run it in disparate organizations in the agency. So part of our calling is to get more efficient and to try to find ways for us to be able to not only maintain the 21,000, but produce more procedures and support optimization. Angela went over our missions briefly: research and development, test and evaluation. We're currently a lot of that work is done in our Global 5000. One of our main things we're working today is all of you use GPS. We're working with different stakeholders on GPS interference. Aviation safety training is where we take FAA ops inspectors and flight test pilots and keep them current in aircraft that they need to perform their job functions. We do some emergency response and transportation NTSB GO teams. For instance, our group at Hangar 6 in Washington National Airport takes a NTSB GO team on accidents. And then the one you probably want to hear most about, flight inspection, right? So that's where the rubber hits the road in the IFP. So flight inspection, we do flight inspection of U.S.-owned navigational aids and flight procedures, to include a worldwide flight inspection of the Department of Defense procedure. So if it's owned by the United States government anywhere in the world, we conduct the flight inspection and the procedures validation. So with that, we do the National Science Foundation at McMurdo every October, all the way to the Air Force Base in Thule, Greenland, and a whole bunch of places in between. So it is truly a worldwide flight operation. And today I want to talk a little bit more about the flight inspection mission. It's more than just I know some of you who operate in the NASA every day, you hear the flight check call sign, and I know our friends in the controller workforce go, "Oh, not on my shift," but it is a necessary evil. And what are we doing when we're there? So our biggest thing for instrument flight procedures is the procedures safe? So we take all this data, AJV and our partners over there, they build this procedures package with all kinds of data. And from that, we take it and does it work in the real world? Does the data match the concrete? Is it safe? And look at that. We look at the equipment and infrastructure. If it's supported by ground navigational aids, ILS, for instance, we periodically check those for accuracy. We're looking at the data accuracy, ARINC 424 and other data sets to make sure that those accurately portray what the procedure is designed to do. The airport environment, obstacles, fixes, holding patterns, you name it, we're looking at all of those things in that environment around the airport to ensure that we can do this safely. With that, you know, we know we need to do more of it. So, you know, COVID's been tough on all of us. Our great team of nearly 500 folks has been working throughout COVID, but not obviously in the early days of COVID, we just could not run the full schedule we would have liked to keep our folks safe. But we've been spooling it back up, and but we know we're backlogged on procedures. We know that optimization will take some surge in the short term, but longer term, we'll be able to shift our resources over to creating new procedures in the NAS. And with that, we're going to overhaul our fleet. That's one of the things we're going to do to try to get more procedures in the system. Our airplanes are on average 30 plus years old, so we're going to redo that fleet. We're going to make they're going to be modern aircraft, and we're going to really get out there, and we need that high level of reliability so we can increase our output. So today we do about 325 procedures per cycle. Those are amendments, new procedures, and periodic inspection. So we do about 325. We want to move that in the short term up to 500, and then beyond that, so that we are not the pinch point in the pipeline. We definitely need to reduce the number of types. As I introduced all those airplanes, you can see there's a whole bunch of different type rated airplanes in there, and that's that from a crew training and standardization and maintenance, very difficult for us to maintain that. And the other thing we are doing is hiring new pilots. So, you know, this is a great audience. If you got pilots that are looking for a job, we're always looking for pilots. So like everyone, the pilots, there's not a lot of pilots out there, and we encourage anyone that wants a great job, come work Flight Check. But our main goal here is to work with our partners at AJV and the industry and do what we can to support optimization and just get it right. And support and optimization means we just want to get you the right procedures at the right time at the right place. That's what we want. We want to support folks that are using this system every day. And our teams are out there using the system every day. And we know there are redundancies that can be corrected. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to all of you. Now you see us out there, know we're out there doing our best to keep the NAS safe and to support this in a very, very important program. Angela, thanks for the invite. Thanks for giving me a few minutes to let folks know what we're doing in AJF to support the NAS.
Thanks, Dave. And more importantly, thank you for the partnership that we share. Now, I'd like to introduce our dynamic moderator, Ryan Almassi. Ryan is the newest member of our Mission Support Executive Team. He is the director of the Eastern Service Center. Our service centers provide a vital function in airspace modernization efforts. The personnel provide the technical skills to design instrument flight procedures, and they are instrumental in implementing our VOR MON program and providing the integration link between agency programs and coordination with air traffic facilities. The optimization of IFPs would not be possible without the leadership of Ryan and his fellow service center directors. Ryan, thank you for accepting the challenge of moderating this event. Your perspective will be invaluable as we navigate through these conversations with our customers that will enable and inform decisions required to move us forward in this effort.
Thank you so much, Angela. And thank you all for joining the Instrument Flight Procedures Optimization Stakeholder Day. We have a great lineup of informative presentations, followed by engaging panels with FAA subject matter experts. We will have 4 pre-recorded presentations today, each followed by a live question and answer period. Our first topic will be the roadmap to National Airspace Modernization, followed by Instrument Flight Procedures Management. We will then have a 15-minute break. When we return from break, we will pick back up with Instrument Flight Procedures Optimization, followed by Instrument Flight Procedures Information Gateway, before ending with some closing remarks today. The purpose of this event is really to share information with you and get stakeholder feedback. Please help us by following along and submitting questions through the Google link, which is in the YouTube description and the comments section of today's broadcast. We fully acknowledge that we may have more questions than we have time in the broadcast today to answer. So we want you to rest assured that we will be taking all the questions and answering them later on through our instrument flight procedures gateway, which you'll hear about in a presentation in one of the segments today. So without further ado, let's get into the presentation and panel discussions portion of today's presentation. Our first presentation is the roadmap to the National Airspace Modernization. Remember, we want to hear from you, so please feel free to submit those questions. Please enjoy the video. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sean Kazika. I am the Air Traffic Organization's Airspace Modernization Manager, and I want to tell you a little bit today about our Airspace Modernization Roadmap. So before we get into some details, let me set the stage from where we're at today. So we have the PBN NAS navigation strategy. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but this is a very high-level vision document that was published in 2016 that lays out a very high-level vision for where we would like to see the National Airspace System in 2030. And it lays out a set of high-level commitments that we're still working towards and we're committed to. Where we want to go next is we want to take that NAS navigation strategy and we want to put an airspace modernization roadmap in place. That roadmap is going to be how we achieve the remaining commitments in the NAS-NAV strategy, and also seizing upon an opportunity to change the way we do business. Now that Metroplex, as a very successful program, is coming to an end, this is an opportunity for us to incorporate the very successful elements of Metroplex into our core business processes. So we won't need a program per se going forward to modernize our national airspace system. It'll be part of what we do all the time. In order to get there, there's going to be two key roles that you're going to see. The first one is national strategic oversight, and that is headquarters level leadership from the Mission Support Services Strategy Organization, providing high level direction, priorities, messaging, and important integration. Part of that national strategic oversight is having the high level headquarters visibility to bring all the relevant stakeholders back together when there's a need to re-examine, change course, or adjust. That is what that national strategic oversight role consists of. The second key role we're going to talk about is regional execution. What that means is empowering our regional leadership teams in the service centers and our service areas to prioritize their workload and deploy resources based on local considerations. That means coordinating and communicating across FAA lines of business and also our stakeholders at a regional level to determine how and where to deploy our resources. Doing that work, prioritizing that work while remaining aligned with our national strategy. So as we move forward, you're going to see three key themes in nearly everything we do. The first key theme you're going to see is integration. And integration means prioritizing, coordinating, and balancing workload at the national level, looking at our programs, looking at where we're asking for resources, looking at how we're deploying resources, and making sure that we're all aligned with the national strategy. Not looking at things from a programmatic perspective, where we're asking for resources, looking at how we're deploying resources, and making sure that we're all aligned with the national strategy. Not looking at things from a programmatic perspective. This means not looking at things from a simple programmatic perspective, but looking at things from an integrated national NAS-wide perspective. Part of integration means looking at our major airports differently, looking at them as airport portfolios, and coordinating across our FAA lines of business and looking at what the plan is for that airport for the medium and long term, and ensuring that all of the work we're doing, including airspace, instrument flight procedures, next-gen technologies, are all in line with where that airport needs to go. Ensuring that when we go out and we ask for resources from air traffic control facilities to our stakeholders joining meetings, that we're doing as much work as we can, when we can, and that work is lining up with where the national strategy wants us to go. The next key element is sustainability. Sustainability in this context means not just scheduling a program and going through and completing a program. It means determining what the objective is and building that into our core business. That way, we don't just achieve something once, it allows us to keep our NAS the way we want it. I want to give you an example. The Instrument Flight Procedures Optimization Program. We've seen initiatives in the past where we've taken inventory of our IFPs and determined that we had too many or not enough. And we went through and we remedied that. But what we didn't do in the long term is put in sustainable processes to keep that IFP inventory where we want it. In the end, this looks like sustainable processes to continuously review, refresh, and modernize our infrastructure, including airspace, instrument flight procedures, and air traffic procedures. Our third key theme is agility. What agility means is balancing our need to be tactical, be safe, respond to real-time events with our need to keep an eye on the future and make sure that we're never stuck in time, that we're always moving forward, that we are responding to new entrants in our system, changing business models, evolving technology, to do that evolution safely while making sure that we get the job done today. That means processes and structures that allow us to have that flexibility. The instrument flight procedure production process is a great example of that. Having the ability to absorb tactical unforeseen events while continuing to move forward on our national priorities, align with our national strategy, is going to allow us to remain agile and not have to be set back so far and so fast when something changes or something unexpected occurs. But where do we need to go? Let me give you a few examples of what this roadmap will look like. So right now, our modernization activities are conducted very tactically. Outside of the Metroplex program, which, as we talked about, is coming to a close, instrument flight procedure work is typically done only when something is entered in the IFP gateway. If nothing is entered in the IFP gateway for an airport, we don't have a recurring process to go out and look at those airports and look at what IFPs we have out there and look at what airspace we have out there. That is where we want to go and be much more strategic and plan. Moving from that tactical response to stakeholder requests and moving to a more strategic, planned, and integrated approach, taking a very methodical, recurring tempo for looking at our instrument flight procedure inventory and our airspace infrastructure around our major airports. Looking at our airspace and IFP inventory to ensure that it's not just the right infrastructure for today's operation, but looking ahead to what's coming in the future. If we're going to go out and look at an airport today, looking down the road to see if TBO technologies, for example, are going to be coming in 2 or 3 years. If there's work we can do now to enable those technologies, that is where that integration piece and that strategic outlook comes in. Enabling those capabilities now, even if they're not going to be there for another 2 years. That way, when it's time to implement, we're ready to go. This means deploying our resources in alignment with that national strategy and our national priorities, looking ahead and being able to plan what resources we're going to need and where we're going to need them, but remaining agile enough to adjust to tactical events. The third element here is messaging. Typically, our messaging is reactive. We respond to stakeholder inquiries, we respond to congressional inquiries. Along with our workload, planning, and resources, we want to shift our messaging to something that's much more strategic. We want to get out ahead and make sure that our stakeholders and congressional overseers know where we're going, why we're going there, and how we're going to get there. And making sure that we keep that connection and that dialogue happening all the time. That's not to say that we won't have to react to messaging as it comes up, because I think that's inevitable. But what it does mean is our stakeholders are going to know where we're going, and that conversation is more focused on the how than the where. And that's a much better place to be. So thank you for listening. This is a very exciting time. We're really looking forward to changing our outlook, changing the way we do business, and working with our stakeholders along the way as we roll out this roadmap and talk about where we want to go and how we want to get there. So again, thank you. I'm sure you'll have questions. Looking forward to answering those when we get to the Q&A session. Talk to you soon.
All right, well, thank you. That was an excellent presentation. Definitely made me excited for an integrated, sustainable, and agile future. I'd like to welcome all of our panelists now to join me on the screen. And I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with who you just heard from, the Acting Airspace and Modernization Group Manager, Sean Kazika. Good afternoon, Sean.
Hi, thanks, Ryan. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to some others. Like Ryan said, Airspace Modernization Group Manager at headquarters, air traffic control background, previously worked in the Western Service Center in the Operations Support Group. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Sean. And let's go to Chris Sutherland. Good afternoon, Chris.
Hey everyone, I'm Chris Sutherland, manager for the Central Operations Support Group. We have multiple teams in OSG that support the instrument flight procedure process. We have airspace, flight procedures, and environmental. And we are based in the Southwest region in Fort Worth, Texas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. And let's go over to Jill Olson. Good afternoon, Jill.
Hey, Ryan. First of all, I just want to say I'm so glad to be here and to be part of this panel. So as you said, I'm Jill Olson. I'm the Aeronautical Information Group Manager at Aeronautical Information Services, which is part of Mission Support. And my group is overall responsible for the IFP Information Gateway, which we'll be talking about just a little bit later on in the show. We're also responsible for the aeronautical data that is used for the maintenance and publication of instrument flight procedures. And as was talked about a little bit earlier, we also have that responsibility of node and policy and operations. Again, happy to be here and looking forward to the conversations.
Thank you, Jill. And let's go over to Christopher Criswell.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, I'm the acting manager of the Airport Data and Airspace branch within the FAA's Office of Airports. We manage the collection of geospatial airport data and information through the Airport Data and Information Portal. This safety critical data includes runways, navies, obstacles that we collect and manage and is used to support instrument flight procedures development. Really looking forward to the conversation discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Christopher. And lastly, we have Carlton Lambiasi.
Thanks, Ryan. Hello, everyone. My name is Carlton Lambiasi, and I work in the Office of Airports that is responsible for engineering standards and the design of civil airports. Since visibility minimums for published instrument procedures is one factor that establishes runway design standards, the Office of Airports are typically heavily involved in that process. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. And I think I might have missed Steve. Did I get you, Steve?
No, that's all right, Ryan. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Steve Shakala. I'm the manager of the Instrument Flight Procedure Group located in Silver Spring, Maryland, and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And my group is responsible for the development and maintenance of instrument flight procedures throughout the United States.
Thanks so much, Steve. And that's our panel today. And like I mentioned, we're going to have a live Q&A session following each of the pre-recorded sessions. So we'll start with some conversation on the roadmap for airspace modernization. So our first question today we've received is, when will the roadmap for airspace modernization be complete? And how are you taking stakeholder inputs on priorities? And for that question, I'll go to Sean Kazika.
All right, thanks, Ryan. So this is a chance to kind of tell you a little bit about the strategy organization's role. This question speaks directly to what our role is. Not only are we building this roadmap and putting it together, but we are pulling all the different things that we already have out there, all the different conversations that have been had, including stakeholder inputs, to make sure that they are part of what we're doing going forward. So the first part of our roadmap is going to be putting down how we're going to deliver on the commitments that were already made in the NASNAV strategy. That NASNAV strategy, like I mentioned in the video, is a joint vision between industry and the agency. So that combined with the input we received from PBN clarification, we've got a lot of great input from industry, mostly through the Next Gen Advisory Committee, that we intend to use as we move forward. After that PBN NASNAV strategy roadmap piece, that's the first part of this overall roadmap. We hope to have a draft of the entire roadmap out by the end of calendar year 2021. And we are looking forward to continuing input from all of our stakeholders as we move forward and roll it out incrementally. It's not going to be a one and done, here it is. It's going to be incremental changes in how we do business. And we're looking forward to having that conversation with you all along the way.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate you giving us an idea of what we can expect. Our next question comes in. When will the first projects under this new mode of operation get started? And for that, I'll go to Chris Sutherland.
All right, thanks, Ryan. As we finish up the two Metroplex projects we have going on, excuse me, in Las Vegas and South Central Florida, we'll start looking at future airspace projects and following activities of the roadmap that was briefed by Sean Kozika earlier. As far as the priorities, we're still working through timelines and priorities, but we hope to start projects in all three service centers by FY22.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. And our next question, does FAA have resources and funding in place to execute against the roadmap? And I think I'll go pivot back to Sean Kozika for that.
All right, thanks, Ryan. So short answer is yes, although resources are always going to be a challenge, it's something we continuously have to work through. So we're changing the way we do business. As we do that, we need to look at the amount and the type of resources that we need to do this work. That's part of national strategic oversight. We're committed to doing this, looking at the right resources for environmental reviews, for instrument flight procedures, for project management as we work through individual modernization efforts at individual airports, and automation so where we can get the most up-to-date analytics to inform our decisions. So we are committed to this, and that includes the resources. Although it's always going to be a challenge, we need to do it the right way and put our resources where we want to go strategically.
Thanks, Sean. It definitely was a big realization for me to recognize all the different disciplines that are involved internally within the FAA when we have to publish or amend or even cancel an instrument flight procedure. It really does take a community of professionals to execute on that. Okay, thank you, panelists, for answering those questions. I think following the last segment, we'll have additional time for even more questions. But for now, we're going to, in the interest of time, move forward into our next segment. And our next segment is going to be on Instrument Flight Procedures Management Program. And we'll have a video, and then I'll join you again for a live Q&A. Thank you and enjoy the video.
Hello, I'm Chris Sutherland with the Central Operations Support Group, and I'm here today to give a brief presentation on the FAA Flight Procedures Management Program. We will discuss the modernization of the NAS, National Airspace System, and FAA Order 8260.43 that details the Flight Procedures Management Program. We will also have a Q&A session with subject matter experts following the presentation. As aviation equipment and users evolve, the NAS needs to do the same. In 2016, the FAA introduced the PBN NAS-NAV strategy, what is called the Performance-Based Navigation National Airspace System Navigation Strategy, and reaffirmed the same strategy in 2019, and it is still in place today. The same NAS infrastructure continues to be upgraded with PBN Instrument Flight Procedures, IFPs, in and out of airports, as well as the PBN high and low airway structure across the country. All submissions of IFPs go through the online IFP gateway, and the requests include potential safety concerns or efficiency through the creation, amendment, and cancellation of IFPs in the NAS. The submission process will also be detailed later in a briefing by Jill Olson discussing the IFP gateway. All submissions via the IFP gateway are in accordance with the 8260.43. FAA Order 8260.43, current version is Charlie, establishes the process for coordinating, approving, and prioritizing all instrument flight procedures requests in the NAS. The order also establishes 3 separate teams that detail their responsibilities, The teams include the validation team, prioritization team, and oversight teams. The validation team is made up of representatives from flight procedures, planning and requirements, air traffic control, and the Office of Airports from all 3 FAA service areas across the country. And each service area has their own validation team. The team reviews the IFP request submissions and ensures it is feasible, provides a benefit to the NAS, ensures it is an adequate use of resources, and is in line with the current FAA initiatives. If the IFP is considered valid, it is forwarded to the prioritization team. The prioritization team has representatives from 3 service areas that include safety, airports, flight programs, airspace, and aeronautical information services. The team establishes and maintains a national IFP prioritization list and schedules of valid requests within a 3-year period. Validated requests include identified safety, airport infrastructure improvements, magnetic variation updates, and national initiatives that have been identified by the oversight team. The oversight team is made up of directors from safety, air traffic control, airports, and mission support services. They provide direction and oversight of the flight procedures management program. And they also meet as needed to resolve conflicts with competing national initiatives that impact the NAS. Some examples of the IFP requests and prioritization categories include the following, but are not limited to: safety, mandatory publications for navigational aid installations, infrastructure changes, and national initiatives. Some national initiatives include the VOR-MON and the PBN NAS modernization. Why is the validation and prioritization of IFPs so important? It prioritizes IFPs on a national basis and ensures that safety remains the most important factor and the operational and strategic needs are met while putting the FAA in position to meet the current and future needs of the National Airspace System. For follow-up, please submit all questions and answers for the SME panel via the online submission process.
Okay, thank you. Good insight on how the FAA operates their validation and prioritization schemes for instrument flight procedures. I'd like to invite all the panelists to join me again, and we'll go through the questions. Let's say, so questions that we have received are: who are the members of the IFP validation and prioritization teams, and which executives make up the IFP oversight committee?
Hey, Ron, I'll take that one. So the validation team, that includes subject matter experts from offices with the Service Center, Aeronautical Information Services, and Office of Airports. They look at the feasibility of the request and how it impacts the NAS. If prioritized, it goes to the, if validated, it goes to the prioritization team. The prioritization team is made up of directors, as briefed in the presentation, from mission support, flight programs, and flight standards. The oversight committee is made up of VPs in the FAA, VPs for mission support, air traffic, airports, and as well as flight standards.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. Next question: how much bandwidth is available for the all other requests category? These are requests that are safety related, mandatory publications, or national initiatives. And I think I will go to Steve Chikala for that one. Hi, Steve.
How you doing? Thank you, Ryan. And I apologize for my camera. It looks like it's malfunctioning. Hopefully I'll get that fixed on the upcoming break. But yeah, it's a great question. You know, as Dave Bolter was mentioning earlier, the FAA has implemented some precautions to ensure the health of the flight inspection aircrew during COVID-19, which has left the FAA with limited bandwidth. And so we were kind of focused on really safety-related mandatory publication dates around runway construction and a few of the national initiatives. However, post-COVID, as COVID-19 restrictions are being lifted, we plan to increase the bandwidth for those in the other category request.
Thanks so much, Steve. Another question: how have new entrants increased the demand for IFPs? Which new entrants require IFPs? Chris, can you take that one, Chris Sutherland?
Sure. So we have quite a few new entrants. We have urban air mobility, supersonic transport, and commercial space. Of course, they all have different performance capabilities. It's very different from what we have in the NAS today. We understand that we do need IFPs to support those new entrants and to integrate those operations to help transition to more of a standard operating NAS versus a one-off or unique operation for those commercial type and urban air mobility operations. We hope in the future to integrate all operations in the NAS so it's more routine for daily operations and not something that's going to stand out and be a burden to users.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. We are actually a little bit ahead of where we had anticipated being at the moment, time-wise. So we are going to launch into our next presentation and take questions associated with that presentation, and then perhaps take a break after that. I know it can get very fatiguing sitting in front of the Zoom camera all the time that many of us have become quite accustomed to during the national health crisis. So with that, our next section is on IFP optimization. We will go to the video, and then when that's done playing, we'll be back on. Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoy the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Shikala, and I'm here to talk to you today about the FAA's Instrument Flight Procedure Optimization process. Did you know the FAA National Airspace System modernization is underway and is evolving the way we evaluate existing and new instrument flight procedures to improve safety and access? The FAA is committed to ensure that the national airspace infrastructure remains secure, sustainable, and resilient. A key component of that is to maintain safety and an acceptable level of resilient navigational services. And as the national airspace system continues to evolve, so does the demand for new IFPs. Maintaining instrument flight procedures requires a significant amount of FAA resources and emphasizes the importance to remove underutilized and redundant procedures. As you can see from this illustration, the number of instrument flight procedures has significantly increased from around 5,000 procedures in 2000 to over 20,000 procedures in 2020 and just over 21,000 procedures today. The FAA, along with industry partners, has done an amazing job with implementing new procedures. What's been missing is a continuous and recurring evaluation to ensure these procedures are still providing the expected benefits and access as intended. Why is optimization so important? As you can see from the previous slide, the IFP inventory has increased, and so has the FAA's maintenance cost and required resources, even with an estimated that 20% of the current IFP inventory has little to no benefits. With the growing IFP inventory, the FAA has realigned resources to maintenance activities, leaving little bandwidth to develop or modernize existing procedures. The increase in inventory has also increased safety concerns with industry, with the growing number of notice to airmen and the complexity between pilots and controllers' communications. What are the benefits of the IFP optimization? It will help FAA deliver on existing commitments and initiatives. It'll help us meet the needs of the rapidly evolving national airspace system and deliver operational benefits to stakeholders, reduction in maintenance costs, reduction in training requirements, complexity, and chart clutter, increase access and safety to underserved airports, help the FAA realign resources to improve integration of new entrances due to the reduction in current inventory, and predictability through data-driven decisions. So how does the IFP optimization work? It's going to leverage existing programs and efforts to identify and remove underutilized and redundant procedures. We're going to implement a recurring process to conduct periodic reviews to ensure these procedures are still meeting the stakeholder needs for safety and access, promotes continued stakeholder engagement and increased customer service. FAA is going to continue to evolve orders and processes and continue development and application of automated data-driven capabilities. Over the past few years, the FAA has made significant progress on enhanced procedure analytics to determine how procedures are being utilized. We have been capturing data on weather, procedure types, usage, aircraft equipage, and airport operations to assist with data-driven decisions. Here are a few examples of data captured that will assist when evaluating procedures. This VOR circling procedure at Payne Field in Washington was only used 95 times out of 10,000 plus operations in 2019. The airport currently has numerous resilient procedures with additional space-based procedures to meet future needs. This procedure is considered underutilized and is a candidate for removal. Here's another example at Santa Barbara Muni in California. This procedure was used over 1,700 times out of 17,000 plus arrivals in 2019. Seems like low usage, so why not remove? Well, this is the only procedure to the prevailing wind runway and predominantly used by general aviation traffic. Without stakeholder engagement, we would not have been able to determine the need for this procedure. This procedure would be a candidate to be retained or redesigned to establish a standalone space-based procedure depending on future needs. This last example is at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. We have two space-based procedures, an RNAV RMP and an RNAV GPS to runway 16 left. The RNAV RMP was only used 17 times. Let me say that again, only used 17 times out of 191,000 plus operations in 2019. The RMP has higher minimums and an identical flight path as the RNAV GPS. So why was this procedure developed with no increase in access or safety? Why are we continuing to maintain this RMP procedure? The recommendation would be to remove the RMP procedure. These were just a few examples of how the FAA is going to validate and analyze all existing and new requests moving forward. The IFP optimization will help to streamline new requests, introduce continuous evaluation of existing procedures, and ensure safety and access to airports. At this time, I'd like to open it up for questions and comments.
Okay, thank you. Certainly some compelling examples and reasons why we would want to optimize our IFP inventory. So I'd like to ask all the panelists again to please join me on the screen. And we'll go through some questions we have received. How did you determine that 20% of the current IFPs have limited NAS benefit? Steve, I'll go to you for that.
Thank you, Ryan. 20% was just really an approximation based on previous efforts with the National Procedure Assessment, and also looking at some of the data that we have obtained over the past few years, and looking at how procedures are being used and if they're being utilized.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Our next question, which types of IFPs will be considered for retirement? And I'll go to Chris Sutherland for that one.
Thanks, Ryan. So the initial focus for the instrument flight procedure retirement was for NDBs and for VORs. And for those VORs that do not support the minimum operating network. However, moving forward, in general, we will evaluate all procedures and determine their need and to ensure they meet the what aviation stakeholders need right now in the NAS.
Thank you, Chris. Next question. How is the process different from the National Procedures Assessment? How is this process different from the National Procedures Assessment? And I'll pivot back to Steve for that answer.
Thank you, Ryan. You know, during the National Procedure Assessment, we learned that we didn't provide enough level or the level of transparency that our stakeholders were expecting of us. As a result, it wasn't clear how the retirement candidates were being made, and it was apparent that we were acting unilaterally. So with those experiences and feedback, we wanted to make a lot of changes on evolving the IFP optimization as going forward. We wanted to review the process to be more transparent and inclusive with our stakeholders with this. And we also wanted to provide all the relevant data and increase stakeholder engagement, so we're all on the same page. So when it comes to how procedures are being used, what their needs are in the future, how's our airport changing, what needs for the community, we want to make sure that we are hand in hand with our stakeholders as we move forward.
Okay, thank you so much, Steve. So as I had previously mentioned, we are going to take a quick 15-minute break. Please come back and join us at 2:10 Eastern time. I'm showing 1:54 right now, so we'll look forward to seeing everyone back at 2:10 Eastern time. Thanks, everyone. See you soon. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had the opportunity to stretch your legs. I just wanted to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the chat. There's a link in the chat that will provide you opportunity to send us those questions. I think we'll have some good time to answer questions during this last segment here. So please encourage you to do so, and we'll get you some good quality information. Our next segment and last segment is going to be on the IFP Information Gateway. This is a great opportunity for you to find out where and how to get additional information for a particular geographic area or airport that you may be interested in. So with that, please enjoy the presentation, and we'll be back with you as soon as it's complete. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jill Olson, and I'm here today to talk to you about the IFP Information Gateway. Today, I am going to be providing you some information on the following topics: explaining what the IFP Information Gateway is, going through the IFP request form and process, explaining various roles within the process, showing how you can sign up for IFP notifications, and IFP inquiries. So what is the IFP Information Gateway? Well, in a nutshell, the Gateway is a centralized portal that serves a variety of organizations and interests. It is a single source for the following: charts, IFP production plan, IFP coordination, IFP documents, IFP request form, which we will go into in further detail, IFP inventory summary, IFP inquiries, more details on this item in a few slides, and IFP notifications. Again, more detail later. As you can see, the IFP Information Gateway is truly a gateway to a lot of valuable information. So let's get started. The first item we will discuss is the IFP request form. As you can see, it is located on the far left side of the main page. And in accordance with FAA Order 8260.43, as discussed earlier with Chris, this is the official conduit used to submit requests for the creation, amendment, or cancellation of a public use IFP when utilizing the gateway. IFP requests are validated for policy compliance, access, safety, and NAS benefits. The validation will consider the following, to name just a few: alignment with the PBN NAS/NAV strategy, compatibility with national initiatives, enhancement of operational efficiency, review of airport IFP services to ensure a comparable IFP is not currently available. We will now start going through the process. When you click the IFP request form, this is the page that you will initially see. There are three role options: internal FAA, airport owner or manager, and other, such as pilot, NBAA, AOPA, etc. So there's a slightly different process for each of the roles. All will submit their request via the IFP Information Gateway and will complete the IFP request form and provide their justification for requested procedure, also including any reduction in existing procedures. For internal FAA requesters, the request will then be routed to the appropriate service center, who will then engage the airport sponsor or owner. For those that fall in the other category, the request will be directly routed to the airport sponsor or owner with a courtesy copy to the appropriate FAA service center. The airport manager or owner has a bit more responsibility, as you can see here. They will review the request, collaborate with other stakeholders as needed, make a determination on whether or not to recommend a request for continued design, agree to participate in any engagement activities, communicate as needed with the proponent. If the request is not recommended, they will communicate with the requester. If recommended, they will then resubmit via the gateway, and the request will then be sent to the appropriate service center. It is important to note that any decision to support an IFP request may change based on various circumstances, as you see stated on the slide. The final determination will be made by the FAA. One of the greatest perks of the Gateway is that stakeholders can sign up for notifications. And this is not limited. You can request information on an entire state, airport, or individual procedure. This notification alert will let you know first that your IFP request was received, when a procedure has been sent to flight check for validation, and when a procedure has been processed for publication, and when it publishes. How cool is that? And we also have an instructional video on the website that will assist with creating an account and how to sign up for notifications. We want to make this as easy and stress-free as possible. So now we have to give a little disclaimer. I'm not going to read this entire slide, but the main point is that the IFP Information Gateway is a communication tool that the FAA is using to talk about proposed changes to flight procedures and to receive technical aeronautical comments. It is not intended to be used to fulfill obligations under the National Environmental Policy Act or other applicable environmental regulations. So now that we've got that out of the way, let me talk to you about another cool tool on the Gateway, flexible searches. This will allow for free text, and searches can be accomplished via airport name or ID, city, state, service area, or region. This feature allows anyone free access to current procedure charts and will allow you to see anything that is currently being worked on. I told you it was pretty cool. Okay, so we know that sometimes people have questions or comments about our procedures, and we want to be able to provide the best customer service possible. On the screen, you see two ways to contact us that will go directly to our aeronautical inquiry portal. We will respond to your inquiry because we want to be able to serve you better. The link in the presentation will direct you to the Gateway website. We are not going to watch the video during this presentation, but highly encourage you to do so if you plan on signing up for an account to receive notifications. We are in the process of updating the website and video, so if you have any recommendations, please provide comments using the inquiry feature. Okay, I know that I threw a lot of information at you. We are very proud of the IFP Information Gateway, but we couldn't share all of the information that is stored on the website during our time together. So please check it out. At this time, I would like to open it up to any questions or comments that you may have.
Okay, great information on where you can find specifics on flight procedures of your interest on the IFP Information Gateway. I do want to again remind folks that you can submit your questions through the link provided in the chat. Also, we have received some questions with regard to specific airports. As a national event, we'll address those specific questions offline, but we will get answers to those folks that submitted questions regarding a specific airport. So I'd like to invite all the panelists to join me back on the screen, and we'll start going through some additional questions that we've received. So first question, after receiving confirmation a request was submitted, there is no notification until the proposed IFPs sent to flight inspection. How does a submitter track the status and disposition of their proposal? Let's go to Sean Kazika for this.
All right, thanks, Ryan. So once a procedure goes in the Gateway, it goes through a couple of processes. The first one is validation, right? And like Jill said, looking to make sure that those procedures are aligned with our national strategy, that we're not deviating from where we'd like to go with the national long term, that we're not putting procedures in or modifying procedures that aren't being used. So the validation team looks at those really thoroughly to make sure that there's a need for it, that there's a solid business case for it, and then it moves to prioritization. And the prioritization team is looking at balancing all the different needs in the NAS with limited production slots. So if a procedure is entered and it either doesn't make it through the validation process or isn't prioritized right away, you're going to receive, the proponent will receive a notification letting them know that it didn't make it through the validation process or the prioritization process.
Thanks, Sean. And we've talked a lot today about FAA Order 8260.43 Charlie. Steve, if somebody wanted some more information about that order, where could they go to find it?
Yeah, Ryan, thank you. They could easily go to a web search and type in FAA Order 8260.43 Charlie, or they could utilize the orders and memorandums that are on the FAA webpage and use the search feature there.
Thanks, Steve. And I think the order itself is maybe 10 or 20 pages, so it's not too bad of a read. Let's go to our next question. This will be for Chris Criswell on airports. When is an AC 150-5300-18 Bravo airport survey required to be conducted? Did you get all that, Chris? You mean to repeat that for you, sir?
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, that's a bit of a mouthful for sure. So maybe just let me describe what exactly that is, that advisory circular. Essentially, this a geospatial data collection standard and also an airport surveying standard. It's close to 500 pages long. It's about 478 pages to be exact. The majority of this document contains geospatial data collection standards, as I said, specifically how to collect the X, Y, and Z values at an airport. And there's a lot of different features and attributes that we collect within the office airports. Specifically, the most important for us are those safety critical data elements that I mentioned in the introduction: runways, nav aids, obstacles, lighting systems, and so forth that we provide to aeronautical information services, and they ingest within their system, and ultimately it's used for instrument flight procedures. So the data is very accurate, it's precise. We require licensed surveyors to collect this data. In addition to that, we use photogrammetric methods. So we have supporting circulars, AC, another mouthful here, AC 150, 5300, 16, which is PACs and SACs, establishing permanent control at the airport. And then 17, which is our imagery standard. So a lot of advisor circulars tied into this, but the bulk of the data collection is the 18B. So when is that required? We get a lot of those questions within the office airports. When do I need to go out and actually conduct a survey? And for federally obligated airports, it would be anytime any safety critical data changes. So anytime there's a change, it's changed or changed, we need to follow this process, the guidance that we have in the advisory circular, and we need to go to our system, which is called the Airport Data and Information Portal. And within the Airport Data Information Portal, there's a suite of applications. One of them that is specific to conducting surveys is called the Airport's Geographic Information System. And the URL to get to the Airport Data Information Portal is adip.faa.gov. So that's how you would access the system and to submit your data, actually to initialize a project and ultimately go through the process, submit the data that we then provide to our partners in aeronautical information services. Another important piece is that the data is verified and validated by another government agency, NOAA, National Geodetic Survey. So it's tightly controlled data because of the importance of it to flight procedure development. And we really want to adhere to that process. So, and we highly encourage not only for the federally obligated airports, but also the non-federally obligated airports that they do collect and return their data to the AC 150, 5300, 18B standard, which is the FAA Office Airport standard for geospatial data, and they submit that data to ADIP so that we can deliver it for flight procedure development.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. This question we've received: as federally obligated airport, that has accepted federal grants, are there any actions? Sorry, things are jumping around on me. My apologies, y'all.
Hey, Ryan,
Okay.
let me help you out. I see the question I can ask.
Oh,
you.
thank you so much.
That will help you out. So the question is, as federally obligated airport that has accepted federal grant funds, are there any actions I need to take besides the instrument flight procedures request? So this is a question for one of our airport friends, I think. So we'll go to Carlton, if you can help us out on this one.
Yes, thanks, Joe. So yes, so federally obligated airports, these are airports that have accepted federal funds, typically to purchase land or develop or improve the airport. So these airports, they're required by federal statute to keep their airport layout plan, typically referred as ALP, up to date. So ALPs depict existing infrastructure, but also shows future improvements that the airports envision. So since an instrument of procedure can affect the ALP, primarily because runway design standards is contingent on visibility minimums, we expect that the ALP to depict the changes on the ALP prior to submitting a request to the Office of Airports. So sponsors, they're encouraged to work with their local airports district office or the regional office for assistance. So the other group of airports are the non-federally obligated airports, which are the airports that have not received federal funds. So those airports, they must be in IFR status prior to the FAA considering the instrument procedure request. Non-federally obligated airports, they can submit FAA Form 7480-1 electronically to the FAA. And this satisfies the Title 14, Part 157 regulation that requires airports submitting notice to the FAA of changing status from VFR to IFR. In both cases, when we're dealing with airport layout plans and the 7480-1 form, the FAA conducts an aeronautical study prior to issuing a determination. So back to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Carlton. Appreciate that. I appreciate the assist, Jill. And the next question is for you, Jill. Why are the URLs on the IFP gateway broken?
Well, thank you for giving me a question. I appreciate it. So URLs are always updated over time. If your link doesn't work, and how many times has this not happened to someone, not just referring to the gateway, but just in general, it could be just because you saved an old URL as a bookmark. So what we recommend is just having users simply either type Aeronautical Information Services or IFP Gateway in the address bar of your browser, then use the search results and to open up the appropriate page and navigate from there and just save that new URL. We're not doing this on purpose. It just happens over time. We just happen to change the link and it just won't work. And before we move on, I just wanted to, if it's okay, Ryan, to touch up on something that Chris shared earlier as he was talking about the ADIP. And when he was talking about it is shared with Aeronautical Information Services to our databases, which is a very true statement. So we receive this, it actually works through my group, and it's some various different ways that we get that. And then that information is then shared with Steve Zucala's group within information flight procedures, and they use that within their system to evaluate procedures. So there's a connection between these different organizations, and it's all dependent on the data that's coming in to develop those procedures. I just wanted to touch on that, and I didn't want to interrupt you. So
yeah, no, thanks, Jill. That's a great point. And to add to that, as Carlton was describing the 7480 process and maintaining your airport layout plan. There's also that's kind of the initiation phase with the 7480 if you're going from VFR to IFR. So it's really important that the next step is to evaluate, do we need to actually conduct that survey, which we're collecting survey grade data for the safety critical data elements we talked about. And also there's all this other data attribution essentially to the locations, the 5010 data that needs to be updated as well. And we're kind of the Office of Airports and adip.fa.gov is the collection point initially, and then we have some validation routines, and then ultimately deliver this over to Aeronautical Information Services as Jill pointed out. So.
And just a quick plug on that, we do need to keep that 5010 updated and everything updated. So another initiative that's going on is the reduction of NOTAMs. And some of what that will do is just by keeping our information updated. So if there's ever any question on how to do that, we do have that aeronautical information portal, and we can use that as a guide.
Great, thank you. Don't go too far, Jill. Next question, am I able to receive notifications in the IFP gateway?
You most certainly are. So we did talk about that through the presentation, but when you do request notifications, we email a document that explains how to sign up for that. That online video also explains the notification process. Like I said, we are updating the video, but that portion is correct. It's just a little, some of it's just a little outdated. We want to make it a little more cool, which is my term I use in my presentation, but we do make sure people know how to do this.
Thank you. Another good plug for the gateway, and lots of great information on the gateway. Okay, next question. Will GPS procedures at low activity general aviation airports still be supported? And I'll go to Steve. Can you help with that, Steve?
Yeah, sure, Ryan. Thank you. The FAA will look at all requests regardless of the airport. So I think part of it is making sure that they go through the gateway, they submit the request, they provide all the supporting information. That way the FAA, along with the airport sponsor and the requester, can actually evaluate the airport. As Chris and Carlton mentioned earlier, there's a lot of requirements, whether it's a VFR airport or IFR airport. We have to look at the infrastructure, how this procedure is going to impact the community, how we're going to engage them moving forward, and make sure that there is a benefit to the National Airspace System, to the users of that community, and also want to ensure safety. But every request will be reviewed and validated in accordance with FAA policies.
Thanks, Stephen. I know that we had discussed a little earlier the 2016 PBN NASNAV strategy. I believe in that strategy we discussed certain navigation services groups and SGs. Steve or Sean, could you expound a little bit on what that is?
Yeah, I'll take that. So yeah, we're still committed to that. That's still how we're looking at procedures based on the number of operations at an airport, the infrastructure at an airport. All of those service groups are spelled out in the NASNAV strategy, and that's still our commitment. So as we go on, we do our validation process, and as we do our recurring instrument flight procedure reviews, that's something we have to continuously look at. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into talking about the roadmap piece at the end in my closing remarks.
Hey, Ryan, I'm going to add something too. When you do look at the smaller GA airports, when we look at redundant or underutilized procedures, especially for amendment, we're not looking to cancel all procedures. If you have IFR capability, we want you to maintain IFR capability. So even though it might be a smaller GA airport and it's not the higher NSG, like he was saying, we're not going to remove capability from airport that you may have.
Thank you, Chris. And just related again to that PBN NASNAV strategy, where can we find that?
The quickest way to find it would be a Google search, because it's all over the place. We can include that URL here to help people go directly to a link, but that's a pretty popular document. It's on the FAA's webpage. A lot of the industry organizations also have it on their website, so it's pretty popular.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. Okay, let's go to the next question. For more constrained airspace like New York Metro, N90, are there plans to modernize Metroplex the area? Sean, I'm going to go to you for this question. So I think what they're asking is, in a constrained airspace like we have in New York with multiple major airports in close proximity, are there plans to conduct some type of modernization of the airspace in that area?
Thanks, Ryan. And as the Eastern Service Center Director and former OSG manager, you are well acquainted with the New York area. So as part of our national modernization efforts, we are committed to modernizing all of our NAS, and that includes New York, obviously. Now, we have to be realistic in how we approach it. So it really comes down to the when and the how. And that's where the national strategic oversight role comes in. because there are a lot of airports in the Northeast, and we typically refer to it as kind of the Northeast corridor, that area from New York to Boston. And there are a lot of different efforts that are pulling resources from our facilities, from our service centers, from our stakeholders, and we really need to make sure that we balance those out. So yes, we do intend to take that on, but we need to make sure we do it in a very, very methodical way. And when we go, and this is a good example, when we go out and we look at modernizing an airport or a couple of airports, we're looking at doing projects that are in a smaller scale than a large Metroplex project. We want to make sure that these are smaller scale. That way we can do more of them on a recurring basis. So we might not go out to an airport like New York, like any of the three main airports in New York, and be able to do all of the work we want to do in one sitting, because then it becomes a really big project like a Metroplex. We really want to scope it down and collaborate with our stakeholders and listen to our air traffic facilities and really understand what we need and scope that work to what we need and stick to that scope as best we can. So again, balancing the resources, making sure that we're not pulling our facilities and stretching them too thin, but also keeping our eye on the future and making sure that we have in place a system to actually modernize and take on the work that we need to take on. So yes, it's just a matter of when and how.
Thanks, Sean. And while we're not introducing a Metroplex to New York like we are in Florida right now, there's always work going on in the Northeast corridor. Is that correct?
Yes, there's work going on everywhere. We've seen a lot of great work going on in the Northeast corridor. The Atlantic coast routes, there's a ultra high sector work going on at Washington Center. There's a whole lot of work going on all the time. So it's not like we're going to go out there and start doing work. It's a matter of taking all those different efforts, integrating them into a methodical fashion with clear objectives, a very finely managed scope, and moving forward with that. And that's also where prioritization comes in, and really empowering our regional leadership teams to look at what resources they have and what are the most important things that they want to accomplish in their region. Because even just talking about the Northeast corridor, that area from New York all the way up to Boston, even though it might not be a big geographic area, that is a very complex, very busy chunk of airspace. So relying on our regional teams on the ground to tell us what's important to them and in which way and when can they take on that work and how do they want to scope it. That's really where we're going to shift our emphasis to that regional execution and letting those regional leadership teams, excuse me, collaborate with our stakeholders in industry, airports, and communities as they do that.
Thanks, Sean. I can certainly say from experience that delays or inefficiencies in the Northeast area have a tendency to trickle throughout the entire NAS and certainly impact areas well beyond New York. So our attention to the Northeast corridor, as well as the rest of the NAS, will always be important. So thank you for that really good answer. Appreciate it. Do want to remind everyone that there's still time to submit your questions, so please continue to do so. Again, you can find the link in the YouTube description of the video. So please go ahead and do that. Also want to let everyone know that this is being recorded, so you can go back and reference some of the questions and the answers that have been provided. So that is available for everyone as well. So next question we have, how will this modernization program confirm or change the agency's commitment to ensuring equitable access to most airspace/airports by legacy non-GPS aircraft? And Sean, I think I'll go back to you for that one.
Thanks, Ryan. So yes, we still will honor that commitment. We're still committed to that. I was going to save some of this discussion for the closing remarks, but I think that's a great question, by the way, to whomever submitted that. And I think it's a good point to discuss that. That is part of what, as the roadmap rolls out, when we talk about implementing sustainable processes to refresh and modernize all the time, this is an example of how we would do that. Because smaller airports require, well, all airports, but smaller airports, they all have their individual flavors. And as we go through and build a process to continually look at what procedures are at those airports, what airspace is there, that's going to be a conversation. That's not going to be somebody from the FAA coming in with a clipboard and saying, oh, this is what you have, this is how many times you used it. That analytics is part of it. But we need to have a conversation with the air traffic facilities, with the airports, and with the industry and say, hey, what is going on at this airport? Because you're going to see some smaller airports that might have 30 conventional procedures. Why? Well, maybe they have flight schools there and they need to train those pilots in those conventional procedures. Maybe there's an airport that has 30 conventional procedures that used to have a flight school, but they don't have them anymore. So maybe they don't need those 30 conventional procedures. That's where the conversation comes in. So yes, we're still committed to that. And we're really looking forward to developing this process where we develop a recurring tempo to go out there and periodically look at these instrument flight procedures, look at the airspace, look at what's going on at the airport, make sure that our infrastructure is aligned with what the airport actually needs.
Thanks, Sean. And I think that lends back to the statement earlier about if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport, right? Because the geography, the environment, the operations, everything, so many different parameters impact and affect the way that we look at the operation and how we intend to accommodate the services and integrate all the different types of aircraft are important. So certainly a very complicated system that we have, but important to have these types of questions so we can understand the desires of what folks who are participating today are looking for. So I've got another question. What criteria will be used to identify retirement candidates? So I'm presuming this is instrument flight procedures for retirement, and I think I'll go to Steve. I saw him unmute there.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. I figured I'd take this one. But so the criteria is our best guess based on the data that we have collected, previous initiatives like the National Procedure Assessment, ongoing initiatives like the VOR MON, and also the performance-based navigation strategy that was laid out in 2016. But we're trying to look at it this differently, and that's what the optimization is about. It's looking about how do we look at things differently. Sean just mentioned a reoccurring process. So when we talk about criteria, it's one is we need to implement a recurring process where we look at every procedure at every airport. We're currently doing that from a safety aspect to make sure if there's any new infrastructure changes, any new obstructions that pop up, we make sure that they're still flight validated and they're safe to fly. But what's been lacking is that extra engagement with that airport and the community on what's needed. Is this procedure still providing the benefit as when it was first introduced? We want to continue that engagement to ensure they have the right procedure for access and also for safety. So it's that reoccurring process and evolving how we engage our stakeholders to ensure they have the right procedure. The data that we've collected helps us paint a picture of how well this procedure is being used or how often it's being used, but we don't really know the need of that procedure until we engage the stakeholder. There's a lot of schoolhouses out there that use these for practice approaches that we're unaware of because it's not captured in our data. We found out that there's certain procedures that are used for helicopter simulator validation. We wouldn't know that until we actually engage the stakeholder. So really the criteria we have is just data that we've obtained. And then the second part is really leveraging our outreach with the stakeholders to ensure that they have the right procedure for today and the right procedure for tomorrow.
Thanks, Stephen. I think it's important to note that these procedures aren't just canceled with the flip of a switch, right? Can you talk a little bit about how folks become knowledgeable that there is a candidate for potential cancellation and that they can provide some comment?
Sure. I think, and Jill mentioned it perfectly, I think there's a video. So if anybody's interested in a procedure or an airport or an entire state or every procedure, they can sign up for those on the IFP Gateway. They'll get notifications of any procedure that's going in, a request be changed, amended, or cancellation, or even developed at airports. So we really want to focus on how we engage people a little bit differently. What are we going to do? And then trying to get them more involved with their user request. We're not trying to go through and take something away. We're trying to make sure that they have the procedures that they need.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Next question. In the event that an airport learns that it may lose an approach or departure procedure that their stakeholders believe is important to keep, will FAA AIP funds be made available for the airport to contract with a non-Fed service provider to maintain the procedure. So I'll read that one quickly again because it did have a couple typos. In the event that an airport learns that it may lose an approach or departure procedure that their stakeholders believe is important to keep, will the FAA AIP funds be made available for the airport to contract with a non-federal service provider to maintain the procedure? And I'll go to our friends in airports on this one. And Chris, you take that one?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So AIP funding, grant funding is used for airport infrastructure projects, so airport infrastructure improvement projects. And there's specific AIP criteria, one of which I do not believe that funding the third party or non-federal service providers for procedure developments would fall within that criteria, but there is a specific office within AIP that deals with AIP that we can reach out to and get more details on that.
If I could add one thing, if this is specific to an airport, I'd simply recommend reaching out to the ADO or the regional office, and they can certainly provide an answer. Because Chris and I, while we work in the Office of Airports, we don't work in the financial assistance division. So the ADO, the region, could help the airport out in regards to the AIP eligibility on that specific question.
Thanks, Carlton. And the ADO is the airport's district office. And where can folks find a list of those offices?
Yeah, so you can simply just Google FAA Airports District Office, and then it will come up as the first link, and you can just click on that, and it will give you a guide based off the various offices and what states they represent.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Next question, I think I'll go to Jill on. How do we comment on procedures in the IFP gateway?
All right. Thanks, Ryan. So we did cover that a little bit in the presentation, but I'll just reiterate it because we do want to hear your comments on our procedures. So for active procedures, we do want that to go through our aeronautical information portal, and that will get responded from the various correct team within aeronautical information services. For the pending ones, it probably will go to the flight procedures team, but there is a button on there on the gateway that says email me, and then that will get submitted. So we'll respond to any queries or questions that you might have in a procedure because you are our customers and we do want to hear from you and to provide the best customer service possible.
Okay, thanks, Jill. And this next question, probably along the same lines with regard to the information gateway. How do we find out about procedures that are being requested for our airport? And I think airports might have a piece of that too. So we'll go to you first, Jill.
Okay, so Steve just mentioned it just a moment ago because that's one of the options we have within the gateways. You can do a flexible search, which means you can type in an entire state, specific airports, however you want to do it. And you can get sign up for the notification to hear any information about that specific airport, state, etc., whatever. And I don't know if Chris or Carlton, if you have something a little bit more you can provide from the airport's perspective, or is it primarily just through the gateway?
Yeah, it's primarily through the gateway. So we have some general information pertaining to future improvements at the airport, which is through the airport layout plan, the ALP document. So for example, if they currently have a non-precision approach, but in the future or ultimate stage, they do look to get a precision procedure, they'll be indicated on the airport layout plan. But specific procedures at an airport, yeah, I would say that would just be in the gateway itself.
And Ryan too, I was going to mention that if they go to the gateway and they do a specific search at an airport and they're looking, there is a production planning that allow them to see what is ongoing for the next 3 years at that airport. So any changes to procedures or new or cancellation, they'll be on there for up for 3 years.
Yep. And just a plug for that gateway, there is so much information that is stored on there. So I really do hope that people check it out because not just what we're talking about here, but just so much more information is on that site.
Thanks. And I know that through these types of questions, something just came to mind. You know, there's obviously a lot of construction at airports, and there's a lot of interest in ensuring that we have instrument flight procedures in place to support that construction. For instance, if there was a runway lengthening project. So maybe our folks from airports, can you address maybe the construction side of the house and how you interact to ensure that we have the procedures there to support new construction?
Yeah, I might have missed part of that, Ryan. So for construction projects, are you asking how future procedures are developed along with those construction activities?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. And, I always turn back to the airport layout plan, which is like the future of the airport. So if there's a future construction project, for example, 1,000-foot extension, obviously you're extending that runway by 1,000 feet. That's a trigger to change the instrument procedure. We will then work with the airport operator along with flight procedures on developing the procedure request and also the future infrastructure changes at the airport.
And just to add to that, Carlton, making sure that we start that surveying process, which is pretty important, that we get the data back into the system.
Yeah, any early engagement, or the earlier the better engagement on infrastructure changes with the FAA will ensure it goes a little bit more smoothly. Because the production plan, we have so many procedures and requests, and the earlier we can pre-plan for these changes and accommodate the airport will make a smooth transition for either whatever infrastructure changes they have at the airport.
Thank you, Steve. And folks, panelists, appreciate that. Next question, how will various aviation stakeholders, airports, operators, maintain awareness of and provide feedback on procedure retirement candidates? So I think this goes back to Steve with regard to the National Procedure Assessment.
Yeah, so every procedure that's going to be considered, again, for cancellation or even amendment or developed will be posted on the Instrument Flight Procedure Gateway. So again, it's a useful tool to look at that. We also make sure that there is a lot of engagement early on, because it's easier to take something out than it is to put it back in. So we want to make sure that we are engaging with the stakeholders and we are canceling the procedures. The NPA was a process helped to put out information early via the gateway to provide awareness of this is the action that we're planning on taking, get some feedback, in addition to what Chris Sutherland's group and Sean's old group do within the service center, that additional engagement with air traffic and the airport and the community. So the NPA just provided additional level of engagement early in the process, so we were not impacting safety or access to an airport.
Thanks, Stephen.
And Brian, just to add to that too, I just want to mention we do have another effort going on with our DoD partners to identify airports that they use for training. That they're not identified as base assigned aircraft, but we know there's a lot of airports out there that the DoD does use for training. So working to try to get a complete list of that. So as we engage our stakeholders, the DoD is part of that as well, so they maintain capability.
Thanks, Chris. And I am seeing several questions on just the types of IFPs that'll be considered for retirement and criteria. I think we've covered some of that, but I'll pivot back to Steve and just ask, you had conversation about the usage and how often we use it, and that might be a parameter by which we determine whether it's a candidate for retirement. Are there other considerations, and what might some of those be?
I think that we look at, and I always say that's a good question, because everybody goes, what procedures are you looking at canceling? Well, I say every procedure is a candidate for cancellation, because one, we need to continue to review it to ensure that's being used. So there's various reasons we look at it. One, it's the nav aids. How are those nav aids supporting that procedure at the airport? Are they being decommissioned, or is the airport changing their infrastructure to remove some of those nav aids, or are they looking for an upgrade? So there's a variety of things. How is the airport upgrading their runway markings or a new survey to get additional services? So therefore, they might no longer need that old legacy approach. There's various conversations, and it's really airport specific on what their needs are now and where they're going to. But it's one of those conversations that every procedure needs to be validated. Every procedure needs to be reviewed to ensure that it has the benefits intended, the access and safety required for the operations for that specific airport.
Yeah, let me just add, I know we've said it a few times, but I really want to emphasize the utilization piece, because it's not just about, numbers. It's about having the right procedures for the right operation. And when we look at why procedures aren't being used, we really want to understand the why, not just the numbers, but is there a reason if air traffic facilities aren't assigned those procedures? Is there a reason? Because it may just be that the procedure isn't designed in a way that it's most useful for them. So that might be the answer. In other cases, the answer might be it's no longer needed. So utilization and looking at the why is going to be really important as we move forward on this.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, panelists. Next question that came in is going to go to Jill. And Jill, I might rephrase the question just slightly. It says, how are procedure inquiries submitted through the AIS portal, but not acted on via immediate NOTAM addressed? So I believe what the question is asking is, how does the NOTAM process interact with procedure inquiries or concerns or issues with procedures?
So I guess the best way to answer this question, we do receive via our portal, receive questions on procedures, and we move those throughout our organization depending on who can answer that question, who can best answer. If it is something that is evaluated and viewed as safety related, we will issue a NOTAM on that particular procedure. If it does not require a NOTAM, it may require a future amendment, which will then be prioritized as to when it gets amended. Not certain if that completely answers the question. Is that enough clarity for you, Ryan, at least, or Steve, do you have some more to offer?
I was just going to say, so we get numerous inquiries on procedures all the time. So as Jill mentioned, if it's safety related, we take immediate action to issue appropriate NOTAM. We've received inquiries on there's a new crane out there because someone's doing some construction on a new building, or a light is out on a tower. So we go through and look at those, what's the issue, and make sure we have the appropriate action. We also get feedback on, hey, this procedure is not being utilized, or hey, can you make some changes to the procedure? So it all varies on what the requests are, and we try to handle those depending on the type of request. Obviously, it's safety related. That's very serious. We want to make sure we get the notice to airmen out there to address those issues. And then if it's something that has to do with a frequency that's wrong, or an airport has updated their CTAF frequency or something like that, then we work those through various data changes in our National Flight Data Digest that comes out every 28 days to update the charts, or as Jill mentioned, through regular amendment process.
Okay, thank you both. And as a reminder, it's not too late to go ahead and submit some of your questions. So if you've got a question, please don't hesitate to ask. And again, the link to do so is in the YouTube description. Also a reminder that this program is being recorded today and will be available for future reference, should you like to do so. Next question coming in for Jill. Do entries in the IFP gateway require contact information for the airport?
Yes, we need to have that information so that we can, if we have further questions, we can contact the airport or the requester. There may be questions from the flight procedures team, from the validation, just to make sure that we have all the information that we need, and we can also keep you informed of the process as it moves through.
Great, thank you. Next question, good question. This one will be for Sean. When should we expect the rollout of the optimization process for our area? Will it happen nationally all at once?
Yeah, that is a great question. And that goes back to the regional leadership teams that I discussed before. And we really want to empower our regional leadership teams to look at what airports, what resources, and what priorities and what workload they have in their area, and come up with how they want to waterfall modernization activities. So taking the core 30 airports, for example, right? Because initially we're going to try to focus on those core 30, and each service area prioritize within their service area how they want to tackle their core 30 in what order and so forth. Looking further down the road, looking at the NSG, the rest of the NSG 2, 3, and some 4 airports, developing a recurring tempo for modernizing those airports. The goal of all this, and when the question said, is this going to be nationally all at once? The goal of this is to be able to keep this going all the time. These projects have to be scoped to where they are sustainable and manageable at the service area level. So the goal is to have a national tempo going the whole time, built into our core business processes. That's going to require national oversight to make sure that as we go forward, we all stay aligned to that national strategy, because things change, right? It's not like you just print out a strategy, hand it out to everybody, and then check in 10 years later. Things change all the time. We have to adjust. That is part of our role in the strategy organization, is to keep our finger on the pulse, keep everyone connected. And when we do need to get together to re-examine what's going on, we pull that conversation together. So it's a combination of empowering our regional leadership teams to prioritize their work in collaboration with stakeholders at the regional level and aligning with the national strategy. So it's going to be national, it's going to be recurring, and it's going to be finally scoped.
And Sean, I think again that sustainable, integrated, and agile approach is going to be really important as we move into the future. Okay, next question. I didn't think you wanted to receive feedback via the email address anymore. Do you want all questions through the AI portal? And I'll go to Jill for that.
Yes, so as I mentioned in that presentation, we are updating that website as well as the video. So when you click on the email me, it does go to our portal. So we are slowly morphing that to go everything to go directly to the portal. And I'll just share, we use that just to as a learning tool, as to maybe a training tool. If there's questions that come in, we do use that portal for various different reasons. So we do want them to go through that portal so we can have a record of everything and we can provide that customer service back.
Great, thank you. Okay, lots of good questions coming in. Next question, how can flight instructors let the FAA know which procedures they fly so they can remain in the NAS? Steve, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I would say if there's procedures out there that specific airports interested in to retain or wants to provide that, they can either use the Everest inquiry through the portal that we have on the IFP gateway, or they can engage the appropriate office of airports, their office with the ADOs, or they can engage the service centers or their FAA counterparts. But there's numerous ways. But the best way to do it, from what I've seen, is really utilize the portal and the gateway. It's a centralized access system for submitting information for us. And that way we can collect that data. And then it's easier for us if I'm doing a procedure assessment on utilization, I have that information. I can say, yep, this procedure is being used by flight schools. It's critical. And then I can reach out to that airport owner and stakeholder to say, hey, is this still a valid requirement? Or are we still using this for flight schools being trained on? And we have that immediate information and response.
Yeah, and let me just emphasize what Steve said about the relationship between the users. In this case, the question was about a flight instructor and the airport operator. That relationship, that communication is very important, because as the FAA, as we engage with those airport operators, we really want them to have a good understanding of what their users need and be able to speak to that. So that would be a perfect example of when we go out and have that conversation and look at the IP inventory there, that airport being able to say, well, yeah, we know we might not use this one very much, but we do need it for, flight training. That's really important to have that communication between the airport sponsor and the users. That way, that communication translates to us.
Thank you, panelists. Here's a good question. What is the status of decommissioning older nav aids such as NDB or non-essential VORs? And I think I'll go to Chris Sutherland on this one. Chris, talk to us about VOR and other nav aid decommissioning.
Sure. So the big effort we have now, of course, is the VRMON effort. We have a goal of decommissioning all non-essential nav aids, VORs, by FY30 right now. We're looking to decommission anywhere from 20 to 25 every year. And when we look at decommissioning VORs, we're not getting rid of all VORs. We're actually only getting rid of about 30%. There's 900 plus in system now, so there'll still be 600 plus VORs remaining in the NAS. To date, don't quote me on the number, we've decommissioned probably 150 to 200 VORs with a plan that goes all the way out through FY30 to remove those VORs that are not part of VRMON, the minimum operating network for the VORs.
Thank you, sir. Here's another question. Can the FAA improve safety by providing vertical guidance to IFP that only has non-precision minimums? As an example, ILS to a LOC only, or LPV to an LNAV only. Steve, do you want to try to take a stab at that one?
Sure. And I think kind of goes back to what Chris and Carlton were talking about, the airport infrastructure and changes. So if they plan on, right now, they only have the survey requirements for a non-precision approach, which is what they're asking for, and they're wanting to upgrade and get a new survey, change their markings and things like that, add additional lighting systems in there. that's when that ALP comes out, that future ALP, and how they design and work with FAA on those infrastructure changes, and then what procedures they'll need in the future. So if they currently have a non-precision approach and they're looking for vertically guided, the first thing we look at is airport infrastructure. What are the changes requesting? When are they going to be done with those innovations or improvements to the airport? And then working with the Office of Airports, trying to make sure that the data is in our system so that way we can build new approaches for that airport.
Thank you, Steve. Next question coming in. Is there any plan to bring the air traffic organization into the AIS portal to handle inquiries about STAR/departure procedures that cannot currently be addressed through the portal? So I think that, again, has to do with the gateway, so I'll pivot over to you.
All right. Well, I'll just say that the portal is an aeronautical information services tool that we utilize to answer questions about our procedures and our data. If we do have questions come in, because sometimes we do, especially Steve's groups, get some that come in and it needs to be answered from the FBT, from the flight procedures teams throughout the service centers, and they will coordinate directly with them. As far as inquiries about STAR and departure procedures that currently be addressed, I'm not certain what that necessarily means, because procedures can come in there and we can answer questions based on those. So a little unclear kind of what this issue is that the person is having, but any question can go through the portal and we'll work with our counterparts to try to find an answer to the question, or to at least gear the person to the right person, to the correct organization.
Yeah, and Jill, to add on a little bit more, if they use that search feature on the gateway and they go in and type in, for example, DFW, and they're looking at a specific STAR departure, on the far right-hand column of that, there is an inquire button, email the FAA. So if they go in there and they have issues or comments, they can email the FAA, and we will ensure it gets to the right POC within the FAA, so that way we can resolve the issue that they're having.
Thank you, appreciate that. This next question, I'll probably go to Mr. Sutherland on it. Current procedure development projects is requiring the FAA to amend new procedures 2 or 3 times. This causes the FAA to use valuable resources, flight check and development slots, when the resources could be better used for additional procedures. Additionally, this is forcing the FAA to spend up to 3 times the cost for each procedure. What can be done to design and implement procedures one time, as has been done successfully many times in the past?
Kind of a difficult question to answer, but I will say there's a lot of reasons why procedures are amended 2 to 3 times. A lot of it is airport infrastructure, like Chris and Carlton said. There's it changes to whether it's anything on the airport movement area. There's new obstacles that are built off airport. A lot of times, if a new building goes up, or there's trees that get cut down, there are changes that have to happen. Our goal always is to amend the procedure or develop the procedure one time, then complete a periodic review to ensure it still meets requirements, still meets criteria. I would say it's really a kind of what's going around, what's in the environment that makes that change to better answer that. You'd have to really look at specifics of why the change is being made.
And I think our long-term strategy that we're building in the roadmap is really going to help with that, by developing not just a recurring process, but developing a waterfall timeline for the 430. It'll give us the ability to look at things way ahead of time. And if, for example, if there's an airport construction project and we're planning to go out and look at the procedures in the airspace in a couple of years, we could have that conversation and try to line those things up as best we can. So do as much work as we can when we go out there, and hopefully eliminate some of those. You're publishing number 1, but you already have version 4 in the gateway to be amended. We're hoping to be able to get out ahead of that through some planning. Also, by transitioning over to airport portfolios and keeping track of our busier airports and understanding what's going on there all the time, including the IFPs, that's going to really help us keep a pulse on those types of things. Now, to Chris's point, some of those things are tactical and some of them are just going to have to be addressed. When there are new obstacles that go up, we need to make sure that our NASA is safe. We need to make sure when we clear an aircraft for a procedure, they can fly safe. So there are going to be times when, no matter how, not not efficient it is, we're going to have to take actions to make sure it's safe. That's our #1 priority. But as best we can going forward, planning is going to really help with some of this.
And I'd also like to add too that we're looking at as part of our process in this whole thing is as we evolve this IFP process, we're looking at the way we currently did business and where we want to go. We know that there's some changes that we can really improve the process and get changes out that occur. So if a procedure is amended today and we have to amend it again in a few more months for a new instruction, we're looking at how we doing this. There could be other ways to use our resources more efficiently and delay some of the flight validation and some of those things to when we perform a periodic review and maintenance. So we can streamline changes to procedures, get them out quicker with changes to infrastructure, and still focus our resources on what's critical to the MATs, which is new or new interests or safety aspects.
All right, thanks, panelists. We've got, looks like about 14 questions on queue with more coming in. So more to go. Is the optimization going to look at removing procedures at core 30 airports, i.e. RNAV, WASP, LPV procedures that are severely underutilized? Chris Sutherland, I'm going to go to you for that.
All righty. So I think that goes back to the kind of briefing Sean said. We're going to look at all procedures, whether it's a RNAV or conventional, SID, STAR, everything. So if it's underutilized or redundant, we're going to look at why do we have additional procedures. If it's not being used, we're going to ask why. I mean, like Sean said, ask air traffic, why is this not being utilized? Does it fit in their operation? Does it hinder their operation? So when looking at all procedures, especially core airports, you want to make sure those procedures provide the benefit and fit the operation of the airport.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, here's just a general knowledge question. I think it's important to clarify these things. What is an IFP and does it have something to do with an IFR rating? Steve, you want to take that one?
Sure, an IFP is an instrument flight procedure that's used during instrument flight rules during IFR weather. So yes, you do have to have an IFR rating to fly it, but I think at some of those training airports, they use those to develop the pilots as they come along. But an instrument flight procedure is to fly during instrument or inclement weather at airports. It's almost like the roadmap on the ground. It's the highways of the sky.
Thanks, Steve. Good analogy. Our next question is an interesting one, might require some folks from international. So we might have to get back to everybody on this one, but let's see if you guys have some information on this. What will the implementation and standardization process be for non-FAA agencies who fly aircraft into US airspace? For example, AFAC in Mexico.
Yeah, let me take a shot at this, Ryan. And you're absolutely right. This is a good discussion for our international organization, which falls under Angela in Mission Support Services now. So as we build this roadmap, including everybody who needs to be part of this is going to be important going forward. Again, it's not taking a piece of paper, printing it out, saying, hey, everybody, here's our plan. It's making sure everybody understands where we're going, why we're going there, what their role is, and who else needs to know. And this question is a great one. So pulling in our friends at Flight Standards to help them make sure that they're communicating with operators and manufacturers on how we're doing things, utilizing international organizations like ICAO, IATA, through the international office in communicating how we're doing things. Even as we go forward, if we change the way we're building procedures or how procedures connect or whether they connect and so forth, we want all of our customers, including those coming from international locations, to know that stuff. So you leveraging those current organizations and just the regular conversations that occur through international organizations, through our international office, with Cenium and all the good relationships they have, because as the administrator stated many times, global leadership is really one of the FAA's focus areas. So we want not everyone just to know what we're doing next, but why we're doing it and why we decided to go that direction. So hopefully I covered at least some of it, Ryan.
Yes, you have. Thank you. I appreciate that. Good run at that one. And I apologize, I'm looking at the camera and I'm seeing that I've gotten very bright. So for those that are in the Southeast United States, like myself, it is quite stormy outside, and the natural light has been blocked by some significant storm clouds, and it's making me look quite bright. So I'll try to adjust that. But in the interim, I've got some more questions coming in. Does the local community have a role in analyzing the airspace airport needs when it comes to proposing new procedures or proposing changes? Maybe I'll go to one of our folks over in airports on that one. Chris, you want to try that, or Carlton?
I'm going to hand this one off to Carlton.
Okay.
Well, so not specifically to a procedure, but we do have, and this goes back to planning documents. So we have airport layout plans, but we also have airport master plans, and they're both planning documents that represents the airport's blueprint for long-term development. So we encourage airport sponsors to include local government, such as local land use planners and engineers, but also airport tenants and users to review and develop these planning documents and any relevant airport development. So to answer the question, we encourage sponsors to work with all stakeholders to ensure that they're involved in that planning process.
Thanks, Carlton. And I know Sean Kazika probably has some good experience with this type of thing as well. So Sean, do you have anything to add on that question?
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so to kind of add on to what Carlton said a moment ago, that relationship between the communities, the elected representatives, and airport sponsors is very important. We really rely on the airport sponsors, airport operators, to help us understand what the community's needs are, what their concerns are, where their focus is. That is very important to us as we look at amending and designing new procedures. So in addition to that, not just individual members of the community, but community organizations like airport roundtables and organizations like that, really staying in touch with the airport operators so they always understand where the areas of concern are. We also have a noise portal that allows anybody to enter noise complaints. We track trends there to help us understand where the community's concerns lie. We've also deployed community engagement officers in most of our regions to help message changes and understand where there are gaps in communication or what the community's concerns are as we go forward and implement and amend procedures. So that is a very important step to us. And all the things that I mentioned here are in addition to the environmental review that takes place when a procedure's amended or implemented. So this is all just through the normal course of business, conversation, and taking our stakeholders' needs and concerns into account.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. Great answer. This next question is specific to Steve, to your briefing. In your briefing about the reduction of IFPs, I think you said the FAA was looking at removing the RMP Zulu runway 16 left at Seattle. Isn't that approach integral to established on RMP efforts at Seattle? Thanks.
That's a great follow-up question to the briefing. So when we looked at the data, and that's what it is. So we analyze the data and then we start engaging the airport and the community. And based on what we found is that procedure was not used at all in 2019. And part of that was we looked at 2019 because it was pre-COVID, but of all the procedure usage, it was used 0 times. So as we look at this procedure, it would be, what did we not get right at the airport, and try to use this as, what do we need to modify or change or create a new procedure to ensure that we are having a positive influence on that area and operation.
Thank you, Steve. Next question, next 2 questions about the New York area and Northeast corridor. So I'll probably go to Sean for a basic overview of what we're looking at here. Is there any thoughts on creating RNAV star with transition to RMP approaches at the New York area airports? This could help to organize the arrival, increasing throughput per airport in the area.
Yes, we're willing to look at anything procedure design-wise that will help us be more efficient. And efficiency being from the controller perspective and from the pilot perspective. So yes, that's obviously on the table. And that's again where the strategy organization comes into play, because if that is how we're going to design procedures in general, we need to make sure that all of our service centers, all of our design teams are designing to that same strategy. So yes, every opportunity we can to connect procedures we're going to take. Additionally, looking forward at technologies that are coming. So if you have, a sequencing tool like TSAS coming down the road, or, established on RMP is potentially coming down the road for an airport. If we're going to go out there and we're going to do work today, and we know that those programs are potentially coming in within the next couple of years, if we can make those changes to the procedures now to enable those technologies now, we're going to do that. So that's, again, where strategy and long-term planning come into play. And I was looking at one of the questions here, actually the Northeast corridor, that's absolutely correct. It's actually from DC to Boston. I'm getting my geography a little backwards there, but it actually is from DC to Boston. And, Ryan, I think there's another question there about the Northeast corridor. So I don't know if you want me to pivot to that now, or you want to go ahead and read the question first.
Yeah, I'll read the question and come back to you. The Northeast corridor is actually from DC to Boston, which is, as you mentioned, correct. It is the New York area that needs significant attention to move into the future. Will you have specialized teams to address the New York area? And as I go to you, Sean, I do want to say that every single day, folks are working on procedures in the New York area. The facilities, the teams that we have in the service center, folks from AJB Alpha, it really is an ongoing effort. But Sean, did you want to add maybe something specific to that?
Yeah, so Ryan, you're right. We're doing work out there every day. Different initiatives, we're doing work all the time. The plan is to integrate those things into something that's more efficient and more deliberate. So as far as specialized teams, I would say all of our teams at the regional level are specialized. And that's why we're empowering them so much, because we want them to leverage their local expertise about where the community's concerns are, what the airport's thoughts are, what the air traffic control facilities needs are. We want them to go in there with that local knowledge and understand what work needs to be done and scope that work out. So as far as picking specialized teams to go, into individual locations, we're not going to do special things like that. I think that's the whole point of empowering those regional leadership teams, is because they understand their operation, they understand their area, and they're best placed to do that work and make those decisions.
Thanks, Sean. Next question I think will be great for our airports folks. How are we ensuring that we are engaging with the appropriate organization at a specific airport? Airport authorities can vary in size and scope. It is important that we are engaging with operational and planning organizations when we are looking at the procedural needs of an airport. Carlton, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I could take that, Ryan. Thank you. So this almost ties in with the previous question, and it goes back to a similar response that we encourage airport sponsors to engage with the community. If there is a need for a specific procedure at an airport, then that can be a consideration in the planning process. The airport sponsor can then reflect that procedure need on the airport layout plan for future improvements. So again, we encourage the communication between the sponsors and the community to ensure that all needs are met in the future.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How closely is the FAA working with or towards ICAO standards in the development and requirements of IFP and airport parameters? I think I'll probably go to Steve on that one. Steve, can you address that?
Can you repeat that for me, Ryan, please?
I can. How closely is the FAA working with or towards ICAO standards in the development and requirements of IFPs and airport parameters? So perhaps how closely we are aligned with ICAO standards for the development of IFPs, and maybe there's an airport question in here with regard to design of airports.
Yeah, so from the procedures aspects, we are a little bit different from form, because they're using the PANSOPS, a different ICAO standard for procedures, where the FAA and I'd have to work out with our flight standards, but traditionally we were going to keep it to our standardized, what we call TERPS criteria, and not looking at leaning forward to PANSOPS at this time. I know for a lot of the international work that we do, OASIS host countries, we do provide that service in hands-off, but for stateside and within the United States, we're a little bit different on how we measure and provide those standards.
Thank you. And folks from airports, Carlton or Chris, any comment perhaps on the airport parameters referenced in this question?
I have no further comment, Ryan.
Yeah, and just to add, I mean, we do work closely with ICAO in ensuring that we're closely aligned as far as our airport standards. So it's something that we actively engage with ICAO on.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. How much does it cost the FAA annually to maintain a procedure? And I think I'll go back to Steve on this one.
So obviously it depends on the type of procedure. Ground-based infrastructure will cost a little bit more because if it's an off airport, you have land lease, you have an actual physical structure, you have utility, you have, depending on if it's a VOR, you have certain distances and radials that they have to flight validate all the time and associated procedures. When you transition to a space-based procedure, obviously we're using satellites, you don't have that ground-based infrastructure, the signals on board of the aircraft, there's a lot less cost involved in maintenance and development of the space-based procedure. But even in the time aspect of it, because when they fly the path, they fly certain trapezoids and certain parameters around a space base, and the area that they have to fly validate for a ground base is a lot greater. So again, there's more time, there's more area to evaluate, and there's a lot more restrictions with a physical nav aid. And really with space base, those areas where we couldn't design a procedure into, we now can, because if it's mountainous terrain, you don't have certain limitations based on the navigational aids, where now you can develop procedures that kind of go through valleys and rivers and things like that.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I know when we heard from Dave Balter earlier from Flight Program Ops, he was talking about the periodic reviews that have to occur with regard to flight validating these procedures. Can you just touch base on the frequency of that?
So I think he covered it's about 18 months between periodic reviews. And I think it's more frequent for when you look at an ILS and a ground-based structure because they have to go out there so often. But a space-based, I think, is a little bit less because the system doesn't deteriorate. There's less interference with the actual satellite procedure. But normally it's around 18 months.
Okay, thank you. Next question. I know airspace has been provided for UAS ops, but are we really prepared for the boom of private sector and UAS usage sharing the same airspace with VFR and IFR flight? I think I will go over to Chris Sutherland in OSG for this question.
All right, thanks, Ryan. So yeah, we do. We know the boom of the UAS and drone operation. It's already here. It's not coming. We actually have a team just within the OSG to deal with UAS operations. The FAA has also came up with some apps that users can utilize. One of them being Lance, which is the low altitude authorization and notification capability. What it gives is the user any option if he wants to go out and fly UAS, especially for commercial use. He can put in the coordinates into his app, notifies air traffic, and if there's any issues with a operation at a specific airport, will they get involved with any kind of communication or mitigation that can be done. We're always looking at how we're going to integrate drones with current commercial activity and VFR capability. There's a lot of users out there that do fly just VFR and have issues with drones. So it's a constant. We're continuing to look at it, but I would say not with just UAS, but also commercial space now as well. Commercial rocket travel is starting to boom as well. So we're looking to integrate not only UAS, but commercial activity as well as rockets, and it's all coming for us.
Yeah, keeping up, and this kind of goes back to the inherent governmental role, right? I mean, when we were kids and watching the Jetsons, who would have thought that we would actually see some of this stuff actually happening? Urban air mobility, commercial space, UAS, supersonic transport. We have 5th generation military aircraft that need a whole lot more airspace in order to train now. There's a lot of things happening in the NAS, and they're happening really fast. And I would say at this point, we're seeing even faster innovation than we probably have in the past. Now, as a government, we're not going to keep up with industry innovation, and that's a good thing, because as much as we want to innovate, we need to make sure that we do it safely. So there has to be that balance there. That's what our job is to provide that balance between moving forward and moving forward safely, right? We don't want to do it too fast. We want to do it safely. And that's where the theme of agility comes in, because we think we can do better there. We can be more agile in responding to our stakeholders' needs safely. And that's one of the things we're going to be looking at through our processes. So are we prepared? Are we ever prepared? I mean, things are moving so fast, but we have to balance it. We have to do it safely. So that's, yeah.
Thank you so much, Sean. I'm showing maybe about 10 more questions. So the next question, are you planning to data catalog to better manage the huge amount of procedures you manage up to now? Jill, I think I'll go to you for that.
So I'm not certain quite what they mean by data cataloging, but we do have a system that will advise when a procedure is due for a periodic review, either every 2 or every 4 years. So we are notified via that way. I'm not certain what other ways as far as data cataloging that information that they're referring to. Steve, do you have any further information that you can provide other than that system, the system that we have that notifies us when it's time for a periodic?
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. So every procedure that we have maintained, it goes into a periodic review, and this system helps us advise when this procedure is, when a periodic review is due. Now, we just released some new software in the middle of April that will assist with streamlining some of our review processes, and also trying to align those to other ongoing efforts for when we evaluate an OE or a crane, an obstacle that's out there that we have to review this procedure. We're trying to use that to capture, so we're not duplicating work. So this system will help us do that.
Great, thank you, panelists. Next question, why is the FAA stating only the core 30 airports will be prioritized? Is it possible to have higher priorities at other airports? Sean, I see you unmuting. You want to take this one, sir?
I do. Thanks, Ryan. First of all, it's a great question, and it's a great opportunity for me to clarify this point. So we're not saying that only the core 30 airports will be prioritized. The service areas are going to look at prioritizing all of their work, including the core 30s. I mentioned the core 30s specifically because they're the busiest airports in the NAS, and they require the most amount of resources from the air traffic facilities, from the instrument flight procedure perspective, from the service center perspective, they're just the biggest amount of resource requirements we have. So we really need to prioritize the core 30s very carefully. Now, that being said, this question speaks to the reason that we're empowering our regional teams, because at the national level, we're not going to know about individual safety concerns at individual airports. That's why we have our regional teams there on the ground, right? So that's what we're going to rely on them for. They might have a lot of work they want to do at a core 30, but they might have a smaller airport that has more significant safety needs, and they're absolutely going to prioritize those needs over something else that is just a modernization project. So again, relying on that local expertise at the regional level and empowering our teams to make those decisions and prioritize their work.
Absolutely right, Sean. So as a member of prioritization team myself, when a procedure comes to us that has been validated, regardless of its geographic location or airport, we are prioritizing it based on the scheme that we have. And as you mentioned earlier, safety is first. So safety concerns will come first as part of the FAA's mission of safety and efficiency. Thank you so much. Next question, has any evaluation been conducted of the ability of UAS to perform any flight check functions, particularly for non-precision RNAV GPS instrument approach procedures? So here's a question about utilizing UAS for really the FAA's work. And I'll pivot over to Steve for this one.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wish Dave Bolter was still on here to kind of talk about this, but just based on conversations that we've had, and we'll provide additional information on the IFP Gateway on the Q&A session when this is over, but they are looking into utilizing UAS. I know that just talking to them, they're kind of going through the funding requirements, what it'll look like, how can they perform that, but we are looking at how we can utilize UASs to perform some of these functions that we're currently doing now.
Thanks, Steve. And I can say from my personal experience, just recently, I approved airspace authorization for testing flight check at FAA facilities on the equipment side, not necessarily for instrument flight procedures, but flight checking an ILS, an instrument landing system. And did somebody else want to chime in there?
Yeah, sorry, Ryan. I just wanted to mention we are evaluating the use of UAS for the data collection around the airport, the obstacles and the runway data, and collecting imagery to return that back. So we're in the process of research and development and incorporating UAS standards within our advisor circulars that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, thank you. UAS, obviously a very exciting field, and the FAA is intending to make good use of the technology as well. Next question. Could you highlight the issue that IFPs are not directly linked to the VOR MON and NDB LOM, or how they should have direct correlation to align levels of effort towards smart divestment processes? And Steve, I'm going to go to you on this one. Do you need me to reread that one?
No, I think I captured the gist, but I might have you read it here in a second. But this is a great question. So I think this kind of goes back to the whole purpose of what we're trying to do. And if we look at the optimization, the National Airspace Modernization as we go forward is really looking at these individual functions that we're doing, our initiatives, the VOR MON, TAC and divestment, NPA. How can we align these things to where we're going to one area at one time and ensuring that we're modernizing that airspace and kind of go forward versus going back and forth? This is a whole overarching goals. We want to start being smarter about what we're doing, how we engage the airports, and going there and doing it one time and trying to get it right. But we do want to shift from targeted efforts on NPA, having continual evaluation of the airspace and airports, and align efforts to where it's a holistic view. So the 43, the A260.43 Charlie was one where it provides the validation and the holistic prioritization where we're going and making sure we're aligned with the roadmap. And now we're trying to tie all these initiatives into this one effort to make sure that we're looking at it from a holistic viewpoint versus an individual programmatic aspect.
All right, thanks, Steve. I go to the next question. A few more questions. Does air traffic formally sign off on the usability of new procedures? Chris, Chris Sutherland, I'll go to you on this one.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Yes, all procedures, when we start once it's validated, determined feasible, we start the design process. Air traffic control and the control facility for that specific airport is part of the work group that comes up with the design. As we go through a lot of times multiple designs, how it fits into the operation with the traffic flow, we come up with a plan. It then goes to the development to Steve Shakala's group and AJB Alpha. And once that is developed, we finally get a map, flight check and fly it. We then go back to our traffic and say, hey, here's what it is. This is what it looks like. Does it fit your operation? We're going to move forward with it. And that's when they really get the final buy-in. Yeah, this is what we wanted. This is how it fits on operation. We think it's a good procedure.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, we do not put new procedures in the NAS without talking to our air traffic control facilities. Right. They're obviously vital to it and have to be trained in the use themselves, just like pilots, to use new procedures. So they're absolutely a very critical part to formulating new procedures. Okay, I'm going to do about 3 more questions. Has any evaluation been conducted of the ability of UAS to perform any? Oh, I think we asked that question already. Okay, let me go to the next one. That was reference us using UASs to perform FAA work. What is the difference between STAR approach and a transition, and what are the advantages of transitions?
I was going to ask Sean, do you want to take that from an air traffic perspective?
Yeah, just in general, a standard terminal arrival procedure is designed to take an aircraft from the en route flight environment to the terminal environment. And an instrument flight procedure is meant to take an aircraft from a point in the terminal environment to the airport. So when we connect those stars and the instrument approaches, we are providing seamless connectivity of flight. So ideally, if we could have everything in a perfect world, we would have an airplane go from flight idle to all the way down to the airport. You know, it's the least amount of fuel, it's the least amount of noise, it's the most predictable flight path. So, you know, we can't get to that perfect world all the time as much as we would like to, but by connecting procedures, it really does help to reduce the need for vectoring by the controllers. It reduces complexity, and it provides more efficiency for the system, and it provides reduced fuel for aircraft that are equipped to do that. So lots of benefits there. It doesn't always work, but it's definitely one of the tools we want to make sure the controllers have. So when it works and they can do it, that they have that ability to do it.
All right. Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you to all the panelists today. If you did ask a question and we didn't get to it today, we'll make sure that we have that information on the information gateway, as well as a couple of the IOUs that we took along the way. I want to thank you all, the panelists, very much for your participation, and I very much appreciate being part of the effort today as moderator as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sean Kazika, and Sean will close us out for the day. I hope you all enjoyed the information on the IFP Optimization Stakeholder Day. Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, Ryan. Great job moderating all the questions. Thanks to the panelists, and thanks to everyone who submitted questions. I got to say, I'm very happy that we got as many questions as we did, and from the tone and the content of the questions, it really seems like we're having a great conversation here. Really good opportunity to share information, to hear what you all are thinking, our stakeholders, and for you to hear where we want to go. So again, great session. Looking forward to a lot more of these types of conversations as the airspace modernization roadmap continues to build out. We would like to have lots more of these conversations. This is a great forum that we've learned through the health crisis. We've gotten much smarter at using Zoom and virtual environments to reach out to the communities through community engagement efforts, and also here to talk to our stakeholders. Let's do that a lot more. We really want to, and we will. Also, regular recurring communication with our stakeholders. You know, we want to hear what you all think. The more we tell you where we want to go, the more we want to hear what your thoughts are on it. Obviously, we have to balance everybody's needs. That's our job, but these types of conversations are very important to make sure that we're all moving forward together and that we're considering everybody's needs as we do that. So please, if you still have questions, submit those so we can respond. Any feedback you all have on this session, please provide that to us, because we want to make sure that if you're taking the time to listen, that you're getting what you need out of it. So we intend to use any feedback we get moving forward in other virtual or maybe someday in-person sessions that we do. So thank you again for your time and joining us. Thank you for your thoughtful questions, and we look forward to many conversations like this in the future. And on that note, everybody have a wonderful afternoon/evening. Thank you.